Welcome to the Take It EV podcast. I'm your host Greg, and today we've got an interview with James from EVA England. We're going to be talking about the new regulations in the UK, and generally about the what folks at EVA England do. But that doesn't mean that if you're from outside of the UK, there's nothing interesting in there for you. I think everyone's curious about what's going on in the world of EVs and how governments adjust to the new world. So we're discussing the public charge point regulations of 2023. There's links in the doobly-doo, so check them out. If you're in England, you should be supporting EVA England. Even if you're a member of other groups, just seriously, they need your help. And they do good stuff.
I'm James Court, and I'm Chief Executive of the EVA, the Drivers Association in England.
Welcome to Take It EV.
It's great to be here again.
So you're not stressed at all?
No, not at all. It's all good. It's been a really good month, actually. Sort of in the height of the huge Lashmare sort of kick or sort of coordinated attack from the antis. It's actually been, on the one hand, nice that we can fight back and sort of find a voice and sort of do some of the rebuttal stuff that I think our members want us to do, which is great. But obviously, it's that classic thing. I wish we didn't have to do it in the way it's being done. But that's you got to play the cards that have been dealt.
So how long has it's what day is it today? It's Thursday, the 13th of July. And obviously, a couple of days ago, the news kind of broke out that the new public charge point regulation 2023 is going to be out soon, or is out. The actual regulation is out. When does it come into play? What role did EVA England play in it?
Yeah, so I mean, we've sort of been taken aback by the response to it, because it's obviously something that we've been working on now for 2 years, and sort of predated me coming and sort of took over the campaign, and we've seen these things coming down the line, and all of it looked exciting, and I keep on trying to get people to be excited about it, but I guess sort of the charge point consumer experience consultation probably doesn't get people hugely excited. And then obviously this is a statutory instrument, and none of these words are particularly sexy. But we've seen sort of a lot of work that OZO have been doing and trying to influence it, and I think trying to also put a bulwark and really trying to say, no, this is a good thing. Like writing to ministers and say, don't lose your nerve on this. What you're doing is a really, really good thing. And there were obviously pushbacks from various groups, and it's when the government does something good, it can occasionally take you by surprise. And I think some of our job was just continuing to give them the confidence to do it. So sort of writing to ministers and meeting with civil servants and just like, no, keep going. And I think until we eventually saw the regulations laid, there's always a risk that there's going to be some sort of sliding back, some sort of slipping. But that hasn't happened. This is a slightly arcane parliamentary process, even more arcane than usual. It's secondary legislation, which means that it goes to the House, it sort of sits in an imaginary box for a while, and unless there's significant pushback from MPs, which never happens, sort of once in a 20-year cycle does a statutory instrument get overturned, and this certainly isn't anywhere near as contentious. So yeah, we don't anticipate any problems. So it should be regulations in 20 days or 20 parliamentary days. And then for a lot of this stuff, you've probably already seen some improvements as companies knew that it's going down the line. But yeah, it's sort of between the various things. They've got 2 years to try and find roaming clubs. They've got 1 year to make the improvements in the contactless and the price transparency, and then they've got a first report on the data and make that open in the next 2 years. So hopefully we'll see some huge improvements over the next 1 to 2 years.
So because we just started talking about it, assuming that everybody's going to know what we're talking about. So
Yeah,
basically, let me give a quick intro. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, um, we have this public charge point regulation of 2023 that lays out how charging points are going to be shared or used by the public, or what is the sort of what is the minimum standard for them to be used. So
yep,
contractors everywhere, 99% uptime,
yep,
24/7 helplines. Um, it's all the charges 8 kilowatts or above, which is
yep.
a bit strange, but I suppose that that's going to lead to another bunch of questions.
Yeah, we can get to the 8 kilowatt one because it's interesting. I mean, just to try and package what we've got now and what's going through, sort of better reliability, clearer pricing structures, easier payments, and open data, which for me is going to be, I think, could be the real sort of revelation in this, as even the best mapping tools have still only got sort of 70-80% coverage, and they're quite clearly not up to date, and sort of they're not always accurate. So I think the open data side of it hopefully should really make sure that if you go to a charger, you know that it is working, and that's a huge improvement. I think when I do long journeys, and I say this to people, is like we do have enough chargers for what we currently have. It's just you get bad experiences if you turn up to one that's not working, and that's the problem, is that you can't guarantee that that charger you think is going to be there is actually going to be there. And that does huge damage to public confidence. And then there's a whole other bunch of stuff when it comes to the innovation side of it. I think we saw the innovations when TfL opened up their data on buses and tubes and all of that, and just the explosion of sort of the third-party applications on your phone and people coming up with smart and interesting ways to use data. As I said, if I was in any way, shape, or form entrepreneurial and wanted to earn lots of money, certainly trying to do clever things with this data in what is going to be a huge, growing market would be where I'd put my time and attention.
I'm sure companies like ZapMap and PlugShare are already busy at work. And open data, like you say, is a big thing because it allows people to create services and integration, like into Google Maps, Apple Maps, whatever.
I mean, the goal is that everybody, like trying to get everybody to have the Tesla driving experience where it's sort of, it does all the thinking for you. And that's got to be the goal ultimately. I mean, this is what makes of the EV driving probably, for me, it's one of those areas that we can get better than petrol and diesel, is that just you can get your car to be so intuitive that you don't even have to think about these things. It's just part of it's part of the software that your car has. And this could lead the way for even poor little Kia owners like me to get the Tesla experience when it comes to driving and charging.
I mean, nothing wrong with a Kia. I'm driving a Kia as well, so
I love it. I've got to be honest. If I could get any other car, I would just get the one model up of the one I currently have, which is quite a boring answer. But yeah, it'd be nice to have preconditioning. I've got the bottom of the range Kia, which is still great. But yeah, it'd be nice on hot and cold days to walk into a perfect car.
I had a quick skim through the articles. I'm not a lawyer, so it all sounds very strange to me when I read it, obviously. But first question that came to my mind, and I haven't had anybody. I skimmed the Twitters and intrawebs for all the possible questions that people had, and oddly enough, I haven't seen anybody poo-pooing on the legislation on Twitters. Maybe I'm in the wrong Twitter, but I haven't seen anything bad being said.
No, not on, not. Not on. And I suppose there's two sides, isn't there? There's the anti-EV people, and then there's the EV people that want to see sort of faster action on it. I haven't seen. I mean, even if you're anti-EVs, how can you possibly, unless you've got a real sort of, you're sort of vindictive. Why would you campaign against this? And I think from the EV sort of driver's point, people will be wanting to see more action on things like VAT and sort of quicker motorway and so more motorway service stations having more chargers. all of that is obviously needed, but these regulations were never going to touch that. So no, I think they've been really warmly welcomed.
Is there anything in this legislation that would fix the most asked question that I have from non-EV drivers who are my passengers on the trips, which is why is no like how do I find these chargers without having any apps? Is there any going to be any signs pointing to a charger? Like I would love to see a sign saying there's a charger in this hotel, or something like this charger is busy, but the next one's 10 miles away. Just keep driving.
Yeah, I mean, that is a real frustration. And I've seen some sort of motorway service stations starting to have information on what charger they've got and how many are free. It's going to be we could regulate on it. My hope is that people who have installed them will be wanting to advertise that they've got them. But it is a frustration if you haven't got mapping apps. And also, if you're driving on your own, you don't always want to be typing this stuff in. I have a couple of times driven into a service station thinking it was going to have a charger, and it doesn't, and that sort of takes you by surprise a little bit. But no, there's no regulations on enforcing signage. But it's something that I hope the industry, and obviously there's a new industry body, Charge UK. It's got to be. These are things that I hope that they can either be doing and sorting out sort of internally and getting that experience much better.
Okay, I thought I missed it, but because it seems like an obvious thing to me. Not that I'm not trying to be negative about the whole thing, because it's obviously amazing that the whole thing is in place, the whole regulation. But again, skimming through it very quickly, I didn't see anything.
No, I didn't. And it's even more, and this is where I think people are missing a trick as well. Even going into the car park, and I'm sure you and everybody listening has done this. You've driven in, there are parking spaces, there are charging spaces there, but it's not immediately clear where in this huge car park the charging spaces are. So even having sort of simple things like a sign a couple of meters high saying electric charging, because that can be a frustration. You're sort of circling around the car park. So a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's still quite a young industry, but there are some low-hanging fruit that I'd hope the industry and the CPOs, charge point operators, can start doing themselves.
Yeah, I mean, when you drive EV for a few years, you get a sixth sense when you get in a car park. You kind of know where the chargers might be. So
I haven't developed that sixth sense yet. Damn it!
I find myself kind of looking in spots like right in the front, to the left or right of the entrance, or way in the back is usually like where I look.
That's true. Yeah, it's very true.
But yeah, I've been driving EVs since 2015, so it's been I've had a chance to develop the sixth sense. So let's get into the questions that I've heard the most, and in all fairness, you and Warren and some other people from EVA have responded to loads of them, but maybe others have questions and they haven't actually seen the responses. So this legislation applies to all chargers 8 kilowatts and above, which presumably is on purpose, kind of leaving out the destination chargers. Why is that?
So there's a bit of history to this as well. Is that originally it was actually going to be 7 kilowatts, and that was just on the edge for a lot of destination chargers and some lamppost chargers. So it's got bumped up to 8. It's an imperfect sort of solution, but it covers up most of some of the discrepancies. And again, you are going to have things like 3-phase and 11 kilowatts and all of this sort of. There are challenges around it, and there could have been other ways to do it. But the government a lot of their legislation was based around kilowatt sort of bandings. So imperfect. There was going to be another consultation, and then in fact there still may be of under 8 kilowatts. But we sort of took the decision that whilst it would be fantastic if everything had contactless, just the cost of doing it actually runs against the quicker sort of rollout, especially of lamppost chargers, which are pretty sort of cheap and cheerful things, around £600 to £800 to install one. And you're sort of hearing that could, it could add an extra 50%, 100% in some cases if they needed to have the contactless and sort of more maintenance on an ongoing basis. So we thought on the balance of it over the ease of using contactless versus the need for getting more out there. On that, especially that most lamppost and destination charges are done by residential people who already have the app and are familiar with it. So the chances of people getting lost trying to find their way to a 3 or 5 kilowatt lamppost charger and not being able to pay, we thought was reasonably low, so worth it.
Yeah, and like I say, most of them are going to be used by residents. And anytime I'm in London and I see one, I'm tempted to use it, and I've got the app. But let's be honest, if you're in London, there's plenty of rapids as well. So
yeah, I wouldn't recommend it either. I mean, most of them, I think my lamppost charger trickles out at like 2 point something kilowatts, which is perfect for me. Most of London's residential parking anyway, so yeah, I don't think there's a lot of people that are popping up for a quick 2 kilowatt boost. That's going to be it's going to be helpful.
Yeah, that's true. The second most asked question that I've seen is, but what about VAT? Because there is currently VAT on rapid charging, right?
Yeah, and that's part of a much wider campaign, which obviously Quinton and Fair Charge are doing. I mean, that is their sort of raison d'etre. That is their campaign. We support it completely. It makes a lot of sense to us. And if you're somebody like me that relies on public charging, it would be a way of, I suppose, levelling up some of the costs. It's always going to be cheaper to charge if you've got a driveway, and especially if you've got all the kit and solar panels and stuff that goes behind it. It's very hard to see how there's ever going to be genuine parity between people that rely on public charging and people that have got their own driveways. But this is a simple way of doing it. Obviously, Treasury always have reservations about cutting VAT, whether or not charge point operators are going to be passing it on, and it's a difficult thing to try and tie up in a bow. But having good faith in the charge point operators, I hope that if they do get this cut, they would pass it on.
Yeah, like I say, it's a budgetary thing rather than
a regulatory thing.
So yeah, that's probably why. But it's a question that everybody's asking, and I think it's a fair question. And like I say, Quinton Wilson and Fair Charge UK have obviously been campaigning about this for as long as I remember. So because the other question that I got asked is this going to apply to the entire UK or just to Great Britain or just England?
So it's across all four countries.
Okay. So not just England, basically. Because I mean, is it worth saying that the Scottish government, with the whole Charge Place Scotland, had something similar in place years ago, or they obviously have their own regulation that mandates that all the charging points in Scotland have to be kind of available under the same scheme, right? I'm not. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm actually going up to Aberdeen, this weekend, but I'm not a frequent traveller to Scotland. And we have our sister group, the EVA Scotland, who will probably be able to answer what it was before.
Yeah.
And I know there's lots of changes going on in the Scottish sort of charging world.
Editing Greg here. I have posed this question to somebody we shall refer to as an CPS insider. Here's the response. It originally started as a way for Transport Scotland to facilitate EV uptake by providing a network of centrally funded chargers operated at arm's length by a subcontractor. A follow-on from Plugged In Places. The CPS brand is still owned by the Transport Scotland, but none of the chargers are. Each is the responsibility of its respective host. As part of the agreement to receive grant funding for chargers, hosts had to sign up with CPS so that the nationwide network could grow. In early days, that also meant providing free electricity, but that's lapsed. As chargers aged and get replaced, owners are allowed to migrate to other CPOs if they like. East Lothian Council is a good example. They have agreements with CPS and Charge.gy, Connected Curb, and others to operate their own regional infrastructure. End of quote. So I just mean, I think this means basically that, yes, this stuff still applies to Scotland, and I was wrong kind of asking this question. Obviously, I didn't know exactly how the Charge Place Scotland operates, even though I had guests in the past who do stuff as part of the CPS. We didn't go into law and agreements with the Scottish government, and perhaps I should have. Nobody emailed me, by the way. If you have any other questions or comments, just always email me, takeitev@gmail.com. And now back to the interview with James. I think being able to use contactless instead of having to apply and get a Charge Place Scotland card, I think is an improvement overall anyway.
Right.
So, yeah, speaking of the 8 kilowatts, so if a post has 11 or 22 kilowatts supply, does that mean that it is then under this regulation? And are we at risk of having charge point operators with destination charges that are above 8 kilowatts but below 23 or 24 or whatever, turning off the 3-phase just to kind of escape the regulations? Because I know famously Podpoint, for instance, they build their chargers to be cheap to install, so they don't have any provisions for contactless, for instance, but some of them are 22 kilowatts. So I do wonder what's going to happen. Obviously, that's a question for them. But do you have you heard anything about it?
As I said, the 8 kilowatt was a niggly issue, and they knew what they wanted to include, but it was hard to sort of. They knew what they wanted to exclude, but unfortunately, some of the terminology was sort of overlapping in things that they didn't want to include. It's definitely that one bit is a little bit imperfect, but it was hard to see how to do it in regulation otherwise. So I hope there aren't going to be unintended consequences of that. But yeah, I know there are companies that are concerned about that.
I mean, I hope companies like Podpoint and probably some others obviously have good intentions, but we'll see what happens. So there is I don't have that page open in front of me, but there's a wording in the regulation that basically states that this only applies to charging points that are open to the public and open to all car brands or whatever. What I'm trying to say is basically what about Tesla? Because obviously, technically superchargers are only for Tesla owners, at least in the UK and Europe. Obviously, this is going to change in the US with the whole North American charging standards stuff, but we're not talking about North America. Tesla has obviously famously opened some of the superchargers to non-Tesla drivers, but they could always say, with this regulation, actually, we're going to turn that off because we just want to restrict this to Tesla owners.
Yeah, I mean, they could do it. So it's worth saying that only the sites that they have opened up to the public under these regulations, and the vast majority of Tesla chargers, obviously, they are a private network, so these regulations don't impact them at all. Tesla have said that they want to open up all of their network, so they would have to comply with it when they do that. But again, and we've had meetings with OZEV on this. There are lots of little. There are some exemptions that you look at, and it's really hard to judge whether or not. So, is a church group that allows their sort of congregation to use it, is that public? There is some legalese under it. So, hopefully, again, it's one of those areas where there isn't any unintended consequences. I think if we find that certain groups it would be a not easy, but it certainly wouldn't be very difficult to amend this statutory instrument if we did see things like that. If there were groups that suddenly find themselves in it, or the interpretation of it, certain groups are finding themselves in it, that you could amend an SI. It's neither easy nor is it hard, but it can be done if it's a significant issue. And again, with Tesla, their route is definitely trying to open up more charge points and trying to get the charge points to compete. So they'll have to adhere to that when they do it. Yeah. But again, some people may, a lot of Tesla drivers will still, and a lot of drivers may still want to use the Tesla interface. The user experience on their apps are pretty good. So yeah, it gives people the option, hopefully, down the line. But at the moment, I always think I thought there was like 14 sites that are opened, but I think somebody corrected me and said there's 21 now. But they'll be part of this.
I really don't know, because I think it changes. They try to open more, but I don't know how they pick those points. I know there's more in Europe, because
I've been personally lobbying Tesla to try and open up more on my regular journey down to Devon. There aren't any Tesla charging sites on either the A303 or M4 and M5. So yeah, my personal non-EVA lobbying to Tesla will be to, can you open up some of these charging sites on my route back home?
Have you tried talking to Elon? No, I'm just joking.
I'll DM him. I'm on Threads. Is he on Threads yet? I don't know.
I doubt it. But so actually, speaking of Tesla, obviously Tesla owners enjoy the sort of the plug and charge experience. Does this regulation include any provisions for that? Because contactless is all nice and great, but wouldn't it be even better if you could just plug in your car and kind of walk away? And
yeah, there's nothing on that, and that would be a difficult. I think that's a high hurdle.
Yeah, okay.
But this is again, these are some of the areas where that open data could try and develop things like that, and I think it gives, hopefully, again, entrepreneurial people the opportunity potentially to reserve and book could be a lot easier with this, and there could be business opportunities for people that are wanting to do it, to try and work with CPOs to try and come up with a booking and reservation system. Who knows? This is one of those areas where I'm hoping 1,000 flowers bloom.
Yeah, well, yeah. I haven't seen anything about this, so that's why I thought I'll ask. But there always has to be room for future improvements, right? So
yeah,
this is one of those things. Another question that I've seen from loads of people is asking, how is this going to be policed? What are the penalties if CPOs don't adhere? I know there's a section in the regulation.
Let me flick to that section. I think it's 10 grand a charger that isn't compliant, and I think it goes up to 250 grand for serious breaches. The enforcement body, I think it's also important that, especially when it comes to the reliability, an awful lot of the newest actors are already at 97, 98, 99%. And we wouldn't want to see gaming of the system, or trying, sort of, again, going back to that classic thing, unintended consequences, which is always the issue when it comes to legislation. The 99% target should not be there to discourage people if they're doing a good job. I think it's something that hopefully will raise the bar on the providers that are already doing a good service, without sort of being so onerous and penal that it disencourages. But we know that there are some charge point operators out there that are running down at sort of 75%, 85%, and that really isn't good enough. A lot of this work is going to be done in the working group, which the EVA have been invited to be part of, to try and figure out what that reliability sort of statistics work. So there'll be a bunch of work that goes on behind the scenes there. And yeah, as I said, let's attack the really poorly performing ones first. And I mean, my personal feeling is, if you're running at 99% in January, and then suddenly, you've got a disaster that happens, and you've nudged down to 98.9. I think if this was overly penal and really sort of penalise people for that type of thing, I think it would be that wouldn't be what I think the intentions of the legislation are.
Okay. It's just it's a question, basically, like whether it's down to public to report these things to somebody, or whether it's kind of like self policing.
No. That's, I mean, they've got to put in a full report to the Secretary of State and others, and there will be an enforcement body that is announced that will be looking at this. And again, so the data, and there's the open data side, and then there's even more sort of onerous data that they've got to provide to the Secretary of State, and that will be figured out by the enforcement body.
Okay. Well, it's good to know that there's an outside body looking into this. Is this?
But I think there will be, and again, there will still be a role for EVA and your listeners. I mean, if it's noticeable that the data isn't reflective of the real world, then we'll have to sort of delve into why that is.
Yeah.
So there will still be a role for that, but you would hope that you can trust the data, especially if you're having to write to the Secretary of State, and there is a huge fine if you falsified sort of your data or breached that. So yeah, hopefully nobody will be sort of fiddling the numbers.
Let's hope so.
I wouldn't advise it.
Is this 99% per site or overall on the network?
The overall network average.
Okay, so there's still a risk that basically, a particular region is going to be pretty low on the reliability, but they're going to have to catch up on everybody else, basically on everything else to make that happen. Okay. Again, this is the first time that I think this sort of regulation is going in. So
yeah, and I think I'm keen to talk to members about some of this stuff as well. I sort of on Twitter over the last couple of days, people saying, well, this will just lead to charges being taken off. Again, my sort of steer on it is that a charger that only works 50% of the time is worse than not having a charger there in the first place. I would actively want them to take that charger and decommission that charger, because there is nothing worse than turning up to a charger and it not working. That is the worst case sort of scenario. So yeah, take them out if they're that unreliable.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm open to that, and I'm keen to hear what members think about that. But that's my sort of that's my instinct.
So, how quickly do you think this is going to be rolled out? What do you see happening in the next couple of months or towards the end of the year?
Yeah, well, they've got a year to comply for the contactless stuff. For some, it's difficult, and again, we supported some of the charge point industry. I think there were some of the non-ultra rapids. They might have had to have installed them within 3 months, and the product just isn't there yet. So I think it was sensible to push that out to a year and give people time to create the products and sort of the literal hardware for this. But we would hope that any infrastructure that goes in from now, sort of, it would make sense. You wouldn't want to be retrofitting stuff you've only just put in. So I think we'll start seeing the rollout reasonably quickly, and then again after the year, it will be a necessity to do it.
Yeah, I think the anybody who's installed the charger in the last, say, 2 years and didn't put in a contactless terminal, I don't know what you're doing. Basically, is the question. Like, because everybody's now expecting. I mean, when I started driving the EV like 8 years ago now, you had to collect a stack of cards to be able to charge. You couldn't just turn up at the charger. Sometimes you could call them. There would be a number on the charger. Sometimes you could call them and be like, I didn't know, and plead with them, and they'll turn it on for free. I mean, I had one lady that basically said to me, if you have and I still remember this to this day, I think it was some sort of a Midland network, Charge Midlands or something. I can't remember what it was called. Something Midlands. Doesn't matter. It doesn't exist anymore. She basically said, if I have any blank cards or cards that are expired, can I just press it on the charger and she will program the card that way? And bless her heart, it did work.
No way.
And I could use, because she didn't know, like, I didn't give them any payment details. That card worked for like 2 years, and I could have used. I was using it without any problems. I did order a card.
Were you paying into this? Was this a bit of a sort of swizz that you had for a couple of years?
Yeah.
Do you want to own up to this? I don't know when the statute of limitations on theft towards something Midlands.
I didn't sign up to. I think it was free anyway, but they wanted you to have your details basically, and I skipped that step, but that was very nice of that lady to enable it. Still remember that. I probably still have that card somewhere in the. It was like a purple blue card from something Midlands. Doesn't matter. Like I said, it doesn't exist anymore. It's probably got integrated into Polar or Charge Your.
Well, probably because they were giving away free chargers and people were ripping them off for years with this new hack that we found out about. They went bust.
I doubt it. I doubt that's just me driving there, 3 times a year. It's
Taking
costing
them
them that much.
down.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, you literally just filled out the form, and they would send you a card for. They might charge you a tenner to send it in the post, but generally there would be no charge for actually charging. Sometimes they wanted you to pay like a yearly subscription, whatever. But those were the days, basically. But back in the day, like I had a 30 kilowatt hour Leaf. I could do 90 something miles on it. So any charger that worked, or you did hassle to get it working, even if that meant calling somebody in a center.
The early pioneers of the revolution.
Those were the days. Whereas now, so I almost forgot when I started this rant. So nowadays, when I drive around, back in the day when we were early pioneers, people helped each other. We used to talk to each other at the charging points. Whereas now, you turn up to a charger, you're trying to smile at somebody, and they'll just like, in a typical English fashion, they just don't want to look at you anymore. But I'm kind of I'm trying to observe.
That's good. That means we've hit the mainstream.
Exactly.
Once, people start acting English around that. We just need to figure out how we can queue in a very English way.
I'm trying to observe what people do, and quite often I see that people just use contactless. They don't even bother with like apps or whatever, and that's a good thing. And I think just people these days just expect contactless to be there, and anybody who's put a charging point in the last 2 years, like I said, without one, what are you doing?
I haven't got much sympathy for that.
No. Like I say, there's enough chargers in the UK for general public to use, with the EV ownership being at whatever percent it is now. But we only get bad press if the charger is not working for whatever reason, technical or vandalism or whatever, or if there's a queue, especially during the peak season. And this leads me out to the next question: is like, have you heard anybody saying anything negative about this legislation? The usual anti-net zero campaign trolls and, I don't know, snowflakes, I would like to call them. They usually just rock up just minutes before something goes into effect, because that's when they think they can bully people into not doing anything good.
I mean, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen sort of the net zero or the tirade, the deluge of FUD that's been going on in the last 2 weeks. You would have to be particularly vindictive to be arguing against sort of making charge points more easy for people to use.
Yeah.
And I think, going back to your last point around the queuing, this is an area that we've got to get better at. I say the industry has to get better at, because I think I'm very aware, and sort of talking about you as sort of an early pioneer, and then sort of you get to the early adopters, and I think I'm in the early adopter stage. We are getting to the early mainstream. And this is one of those areas where it can be very off-putting for people. Like, I have to have a conversation with someone to queue. I've got to know the queuing system. Sometimes, do I have to exert myself? Do I have to, what if someone just sort of bullies you out of it? These are things that when we get to the mainstream, and I think this is why these regulations are also so important, although don't cover this side of it, is that the experience to date is good. And as you said, most EV drivers, they've got a plan A, and then they've got a plan B, and sometimes have a plan C. And again, when I'm driving down to Devon, I've already got that because I've done it a few times. If I'm in a new area, I definitely have a plan B in my head. That's not really good enough for a mainstream product, which is what this will be in a few years' time. And sort of, I always go back to my grandma. Like, will my grandma be able to do this? Does my grandmother, will it be a good experience? And for some people, I wouldn't recommend it on that basis, as it stands right now. So we do need to get better at that, and better sort of reasonably quickly, as we're getting sort of normal people driving it, unlike abnormal people like us.
I do agree. These are the sort of people who ask me questions like this. When you drive EVs for a while, you kind of get, and you're capable of dealing with little problems. You kind of miss the questions that the mainstream public might have. Right? Not everybody's as clever with apps and stuff as some of us. I think you covered this already, but the last point that I have on my list is is this a law or a draft? And I mean, you said that at the beginning that it's very unlikely that this will not go into the effect.
Yeah, massively unlikely. So this all comes from the Vehicle and Automated Vehicles Bill, and that's sort of, if you think of a legislation, that's the primary legislation that this hangs off of. And this is the secondary legislation which allows ministers to say in a primary bit of work, we plan to do this. And on that point, it was about making it easier for certain things. And then they consult on it, then this comes out. So it is a reasonably smooth process. And there are thousands of SIs every year, and they all go through.
Okay.
So yeah, it's now definitely a thing, barring a disaster, which I just can't see happening in the next 20 days.
So lastly, I mean, the main reason I got you on is what is the role of EVA England in this? And plug yourself.
Yeah,
brag.
Well, as I said, this has been a campaign that we've been working on for a couple of years, and it came out of a survey that we did of our members, and sort of that helped guide our campaigning work on this and the policy asks that we had. We are planning to do a new survey. It may, in fact, already be out by the time this podcast comes out. So we took the steer from the members, and that had such an impact, I think, on OZEV, because they could sort of say to ministers, and ministers could look at sort of industry and people arguing against it, look, it's very clear this is what EV drivers want. And that was very impactful. So having that opportunity and having an organisation like us coming there and sort of saying that and sort of making that voice heard, I think has been crucial, and I hope has sort of emboldened the civil servants and the ministers to do this legislation, because it would have been very easy not to. So yeah, sort of it was a good day. It's a good piece of work, and we're very happy to do it. And I think it is going to have a real impact. And again, now for us, as I said, we're going to be putting out our next survey, trying to see what EV drivers are wanting. And that will form a large part of what we're campaigning for the next year.
Are things going to be happening more quickly now, do you think? Or because obviously, anything going through the parliament and legislative bodies in any country, it's not just the UK. It takes time, right? Is there anything coming up that you can talk about, or?
There's not really. There's MOTs and there's things, sort of MOT consultation coming out. The big one is obviously the ZEV mandate, which is the reason why we are seeing sort of the pushback we have. And I was quietly amazed at just how bad the industry were at lobbying against this for the last 18 months. And the frustrating thing about all of the changes and chops that happened last year with sort of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss is that we should have had this mandate already last year. And the fact that it's been delayed has led to this just brutal pile-on, and it is a coordinated and paid-for pile-on. And sort of, almost hats off to them, actually, having been so terrible for 18 months. The dark side got their act together, and I think there are some wobbles about the ZEV mandate, which will be hugely disappointing if there's any slippage on it at all. The message that sends to investors, the message that just sends to anyone, is terrible, because I think that ultimately we're looking at this. There are 20 to 30% of cars that are going to be electric by 2030 if this passes. And if you're telling me that this country can't install 30,000 charging points, 30,000 plugs, that we need to delay this because we're that pathetic a country that in 7 years we can't overcome this massive challenge of putting 300,000 plugs into the country, then Jesus, what the hell? We've got much bigger challenges than that. So I think it's as you call them, snowflakes. Like, I can't imagine what these people would have been like during their own sort of, these guys loved the Second World War. Christ, imagine if we had their spirit during the Second World War. I think we'd have given up and rolled over. Let's a bit of perspective on what this challenge is and how easy it should be to be achieved.
Oh, that's it. I noticed that they always pipe up close to the deadline. So the closer we're getting to 2030, the more we're going to hear from them, because they rely on the public not hearing anything, and at the last minute they just stir up the anti crowd with pathetic incentives and pathetic arguments. Usually,
they were really scraping the back. I think they really wanted to have a week's worth. This is the Daily Mail. They really wanted to have a week's worth of headlines about it, and they really did start scraping the barrel about, oh God, everybody's got to have 18 or 20 charging apps. Well, firstly, you don't have to, and secondly, have you seen how many apps you need to access the news right now? Like, this is social media. You've got like 6 or 7 apps. I think once your headline is, oh God, you've got to have some apps on your phone, it's like, I think you're
have you? Yeah,
people have a week.
Yeah. People have loads of apps on their phones already. Like that's not a good argument, is it?
It's not It's not hold the front page news.
No.
Hey guys, some people have to have 18 apps. Right, we're clearing the front page. Nothing else matters.
And obviously, this legislation, mandates the contactless. That kind of blows away all those arguments straight off. Of the bat.
So a lot of this work is made possible because we've got members who pay, and I think if you're an EV driver, we would love you to be a member. We don't have corporate partners. We're not paid for by the charge point operators or by manufacturers. Our funding has to come from our members, and I hope that the success we've had on this can show what an effective drivers association can do, giving your voice to government. So yeah, if you can afford to join us, I think it would be great to have your support, because we really do rely on it.
I am a member, and most people that I know are members of EVA England. Of course, if you don't live in England, then that's a different matter.
Yeah, well, you should also. There is soon to be. There are some people in Wales who are doing fantastic work trying to set this organisation up. So there'll be any Welsh listeners once the Welsh or the Cymru EVA is launched. EVA Scotland's been around a lot longer than us, but if you're listening in Scotland, join your EVA. If you're listening in Norway and Australia, Austria, France, you all have EVAs, and you should all join your national EVA too.
Okay. Thank you for your time, James.